Most recognized for his crime thriller films from the 1980s and 90s, John Woo is a heavily renowned Hong Kong and Hollywood film director known for his high-packed, violent action movies centered around friendship, redemption, and the duality of man, all while sprinkling in elements of romance, resulting in a new subgenre of action dubbed heroic bloodshed. He is a premier director of the Hong Kong New Wave movement, with numerous personal stylistic elements used throughout his films, giving him a name in both China and America. Throughout his career, Wu has directed over 40 films. In this presentation, I'll be focusing on those at the height of his career in Hong Kong, most notably of which are the films The Killer and A Better Tomorrow. Born in Hong Kong in 1946, John Woo grew up very poor in local housing projects that were laden with crime, even saying in an interview, "Whenever I went out the house, I had to grab something as a weapon for protection. I had to fight really hard to survive. I never gave up. I fought back." Lutheran churches would often provide assistance to his family, leading Wu to become very religious during his childhood. His upbringing greatly inspired his films later on, as many are focused around criminal organizations and filled with religious imagery and symbols. In addition to his childhood, Wu cites several key movies that influenced his style, French New Wave films and directors especially, most notably of which are Francois Truffaut, for whom Wu cites his use of freeze frames, and Jean Melville's Le Samouraï, in which we see the inspiration for many of Wu's characters wearing trench coats, which is now commonly referred to as the Mark Gore look, in reference to Chow Yun-fat's character in A Better Tomorrow. Wu also credits George Hill's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, in which we see Wu's inspiration for his trademark dual-wielding pistols, tense standoffs, as well as many other Western stylistic elements. However, not all of John Woo's inspirations were foreign. Hong Kong cinema, such as Wuxia films, were key in helping Wu establish his cinematic action style, specifically their fluid cinematography within action sequences, and plot structures featuring the main character being forced to fight off waves of criminals. Taking a look at the evolution of Wu's themes and styles, his career started in the 1970s. Here it can be categorized as a much wider variety in the genre of films made compared to later on in his career. His films containing just as much comedy and romance as they did action. In addition, his films during this period carried traditional Hong Kong cinematic styles. The 80s and early 90s were what many considered to be the height of Wu's career. Nearly all of his films being fast-paced action thrillers, typically featuring criminals and police going head-to-head in shootouts that forever changed action films within Hong Kong. During this time, Wu also developed his most notable motifs, such as flying doves, as well as themes of friendship and honor taking the forefront of his narratives, as his cinematic style became more of a mix between Hong Kong and Hollywood. As his success continued to rise, Wu left Hong Kong and shifted to Hollywood in the mid-1990s. His films of this period holding darker tones with over-the-top plots, and his themes of friendship were replaced with an emphasis on family as his style became increasingly westernized. Wu's film career started as a script supervisor at Shaw Brothers Studio in 1969, working his way up to assistant director before directing his first feature film, The Young Dragons, in 1974. This kung fu romance showcases a clear talent for action that Wu has become famous for. After The Young Dragons, Wu worked on 7 more films in the 1970s, most of which heavily focused on elements of romance while incorporating in humor and action as well. The 80s and early 90s served as the height of Wu's career, cementing him as one of the greats within the action genre, as his films of this period were much more action-oriented, featuring characters with strong morals and themes that placed heavy emphasis on friendship, honor, and redemption. These high-paced action films are commonly accompanied with comedic and romantic tones that were developed earlier in his career. This period also features some of his most recognizable motifs of flying doves, religious imagery, and characters dual-wielding pistols. His most popular films of this period are A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, and Hard Boiled. Romantic elements play a large role within all of Wu's films. He summarizes the connection between romance and action in his films perfectly in this quote, saying, Action movies are no different than any other movie. Good movies are all about characters, about humanity, about good story. All my films are romantic, while they may not be about romance. While almost always falling within the action genre, John Woo's films of the 80s and early 90s focus heavily on themes of crime, wherein the main character, who's typically played by Chow Yun-fat, is betrayed or makes a mistake and must face hordes of enemies in order to achieve their redemption or revenge. These themes, in addition to themes of honor and companionship, are wrapped in a combination of Hong Kong kung fu and Hollywood shootout style of action. However, just as Wu states in his previous quote, romance also plays a large role within this violent action. Love interests are commonly used throughout his films, and characters have deep emotional ties with one another. Themes of brotherhood and friendship taking the forefront in numerous scenes within John Woo's films of this period. These themes are showcased within characters of strong morals but varying ethical backgrounds, such as soft-hearted assassins and disgraced detectives. Wu gives exposition and history between characters through numerous flashbacks and witty comedic dialogue. We can see this companionship, as well as a number of other Wu's trademarks, in the church shootout scene at the end of The Killer, most recognizable of which are Wu's trademark dove motifs, which he cites as symbols of purity linked to his Christian upbringing, as they are messengers between people and God. This church shootout scene within Wu's hit film The Killer also serves as a great example of his stylistic form. We see constant cuts between the two protagonists, emphasizing their newfound connection, as well as fluid rotating camera movement and constant slow motion shots that heighten the action while keeping the viewer immersed within the chaos. While stories and plot lines within Wu's films may tend to be hard to follow due to rapid jump cuts and quick transitioning scenes, his editing and cinematography of action rarely ever fails. The shots and editing of action sequences are fluidly balanced with the fight choreography. The fighting looks and feels realistic, while being supported by motivated camera movement and cuts that enhance the action. Dutch angles, whip pans, quickly cut close-ups, and zoom-ins are all used to showcase moments of high tension, most often used in moments before a shootout or before an assassination. Wu will also rapidly cut between close-ups of characters' eyes and guns during standoffs, and dramatically intercut slow motion within action sequences to increase the tension. Sound is also used to build the tension as well as indicate a character's archetype, sinister characters often being introduced as such through dark or ominous music. Similarly, color is used to showcase a character's morality as well. Criminals often dressed in black, while innocents and investigators are dressed in white. However, Wu has been known to flip this motif halfway through, seen in the film The Killer. This reversal of black and white represents the gray area that exists between justice and crime, as Ah Zhang, an assassin played by Chow Yun-fat, and Danny Lee, a determined detective, must work together in order to bring down a criminal organization. Wu's move from Hong Kong to Hollywood in the late 1990s marks an important shift in his career and a clear change in his style of filmmaking as he focuses on his new American audience. In his transition to Hollywood, Wu's typical narrative style changed as criminal enterprises were exchanged for terrorists motivated by greed and destruction. As a result, plots became less realistic as stakes became incredibly high, protagonists battling with larger than life evil archetypes, hiding away deadly gas and nuclear warheads. Wu's themes in Hollywood differed greatly than those in Hong Kong, with less emphasis on friendship, honor, and redemption, and more so on revenge, family, and stolen identity, seen in movies such as Face Off, Mission Impossible 2, and Paycheck. However, he did still layer in religious themes, his famous dove motif, as well as keeping his trademark double pistols and stylistic slow motion. These themes, in addition to dialogue that was much less comedic than those in Hong Kong, leads to a much darker tone that contrasts heavily with his saturated color palette. And while he was welcomed with open arms by studios, he struggled working within Hollywood, quoted saying, "Even though I enjoyed the opportunity to work in Hollywood, I never got used to their system. I didn't like much of the studio people. Well, there are too much politics and so much going along, and a lot of them have nothing to do with the movie. It's all about power. It's all about egos." However, despite his struggles, Wu's action films have forever changed Hollywood action, and those most famous directors who still emulate Wu's style. John Woo continues to remain as one of the most influential forces in action films, seen today in films such as John Wick, which take Wu's fast-paced action shootout style to the max. Wu is credited for impacting numerous American films and directors, from Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs to Martin Scorsese's The Departed. As a multicultural director, Wu also had numerous impacts on Hong Kong film. Once Upon a Time in China, directed by Su Hark, is greatly reflective of Wu's style. The fight choreography and fluid cinematography are strikingly similar, despite Wu's action being more shootout-oriented. Hark and Wu have had a long-standing relationship, Hark going as far as to partially fund Wu's hit success A Better Tomorrow, which some credit as being the film that reinvented the Hong Kong action genre, quote, breaking out of the martial arts mold and shifting the action from kung fu to handguns. In 2008, Wu made his return back to Hong Kong with Red Cliff, a dramatic war film set in the Han Dynasty. In addition to his sequel, he has also directed another two-part war film titled The Crossing, a wuxia film titled Reign of Assassins, and his most recent film in 2017, Manhunt, a Wu action film that combines elements of his Hong Kong and Hollywood action films, resulting in a darkly toned redemption arc with fluid kung fu and shootout action scenes. His past collides, resulting in a film with Hollywood-style cinematic coloring and traditional Hong Kong imagery, as well as being filled with many of Wu's trademarks, from flying doves to the highly advanced technology commonly seen in his Hollywood films. While he may be most recognized for his trademark flying doves and slow-mo action scenes with protagonists dual-wielding pistols, Wu is a revolutionary force in action films of Hong Kong and Hollywood alike, developing the heroic bloodshed subgenre through his narrative style by adding heavy layers of emotion and romance within each movie, no matter how violent. Now that John Woo has returned to Hong Kong, I look forward to seeing what comes next and how he will continue to pair romance and action within whatever he creates.